why 6v6 is not the answer. Let's take a look.
Hey guys, Death by Phil here. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm going to talk to you about why 6v6 is not the answer and 5v5 is the way we should be doing it. And I'll go back to thinking about Overwatch 1 days. I know we have a lot of nostalgia to when the game was new. And a lot of people say, well, Overwatch went into the gutter and it's trash and it's not playable anymore and it's not fun. All that may be true, but the reason why Overwatch 1 felt so good was when it originally came out, you all seem to forget it was Game of the Year.
So nobody who's arguing for 6v6 is arguing for 2016 Overwatch. We want October of 2020. We want the peak roll queue Overwatch. So if this argument's going to be, oh, you guys just want the old game, 2016 Overwatch never coming back. No, not a single person who's asking for 6v6 has said that, right? You're making a claim that nobody's arguing. We want October of 2020 Overwatch back, the best state the game's ever been in. 6v6 roll lock and a balanced patch where all queue times were okay, because guess what? Every roll was fun. Nobody's asking for 2016 Overwatch, so this is incorrect off the rip, but
it was a new, fun, exciting, fast-paced first-person shooter that was just fresh and new to the environment. It wasn't these slower-paced games like Counter-Strike. Another example, which wasn't out yet, it's not a slower-paced game like Valorant. I mean, if you like those games, that's cool and fine with you, but the whole point of Overwatch was it was fast-paced.
And he is right about this, but like this is just nobody's arguing this, right?
Quick games, usually quick to get into games and just have fun with your friends and try new and different things. Sure. We go back to Overwatch 1, we think about 6v6, and we think about higher elo. Higher elo play was basically unplayable the last few years of Overwatch 1 because queue times were just egregious. And if you played...
Yeah, and the queue times were egregious because they left the game on a horrible balance patch, weren't updating the game at all, and everyone was looking forward to Overwatch 2. So they intentionally made a horrible balance patch, made the game miserable for everybody, never fixed the broken heroes that they put in the game because they were working on the sequel, all of which they could have done in the previous format, right? And 6v6 actually is not being argued for high elo. I would say that 6v6 is better for low elo players as well. Because now, like I talked about, counter swapping is a thing in all ranks when it never was a thing in Overwatch 1, right? All heroes on the field were more killable because abilities weren't as strong, which means that the casual experience, it was more in the hands of the player, right? Rather than the game forcing oppressive abilities on them. That's also better for a casual player, right? Overwatch 2, the game forces more decisions on you than Overwatch 1, and that is because of the design of heroes in 5v5.
Tank, when you had 2 tanks, 2 TPS, and 2 supports, you'd get a game right away, but oftentimes, like if you were a GM tank, you'd be put into like a diamond lobby or like a low masters lobby, and you never really had a fun time because you know
that's not true of October of 2020 when the game in roll queue, and this happens even now because it already happened in 5v5, right? When the game balance goes out of whack and the power distribution between the roles is not even, it makes queue times lopsided. This already happened in Overwatch 2 when in Season 7, it was the double shield sustain meta and things were living too long. DPS queue times at top 500 even as well were instant because people want to play the fun and powerful roles. This is not a tank-specific issue. It is a balance issue. And not to mention, if we say that queue times are affected by the fun and power distribution of roles, it is harder to equally distribute power between the roles in 5v5 when there's only one tank and 2 of the other roles. It's even harder. So it's not a problem unique to tank. It is a role queue thing that can happen to each of the roles. But in Overwatch 1, it happened the most to tank because they put an Overwatch 2 tank called Sigma in Overwatch 1, which was overkitted. And Orisa and Sigma were easy to play, and they countered all of the fun to play tanks that were the original heroes that people were willing to queue up and play. That's what it was. And so did Bap and Brig, right? That's why in October of 2020, when queue times were great, they were great because people were playing Monkey Diva, Rein Zarya, Double Bubble, right? They were playing a wide variation of comps for the tank heroes that were actually fun, and backlines were punishable, and it wasn't Bap Brig every game. It was Lucio Moira, Lucio Ana, Lucio Bap. It could actually secure kills, which made the tank role fun and appealing. Instead, they made the worst patch of all time, spit in the face of the community, did everything wrong, and you can go back and watch Seagull's video about it, and Flats and I reacting to Seagull's video about it, and made the worst patch of all time and then abandoned the game for Overwatch 2 because they wanted to make 6v6 look bad. That's my hot take. It looked intentional back then, and now that we see why they wanted to go to 5v5, it probably was intentional. I wouldn't be surprised at all. It's a complete conspiracy, but I wouldn't be surprised. There's no way, because here's the thing, guys. I saw the feedback Jeff Kaplan got. I was in the creator server. Never in my life in the Overwatch scene did I ever see such unanimously positive feedback. Everybody came back and complimented them in the dev Discord. Seagull said they did a great job directly to Kaplan, and he was saying thank you. They were acknowledging the feedback. They directly acknowledged how happy we were with them. All of them did. Team 4 did. Kaplan. Right? Everybody. Seagull said it. Kabaji said it. DeFran said it. I said it. Frito said it. Nate said it. SVB said it. Jake said it. Hollyworld said it. Everybody, every creator from every era of Overwatch gave them positive feedback, and then they immediately shit on it. It was intentional. You can't convince me otherwise. I'm sorry. So, like, again, this is not a unique to tank issue. This is a role queue issue, and if you ruin the balance of the game in role queue, it also will adversely affect queue times. That's all it was in Overwatch 1. It wasn't because there were 2 tanks. October of 2020 was peak Overwatch. This is pretty much unanimously accepted by the community. Greatest patch of all time.
It's crazy to be put into such lower lobbies. The other thing that would happen is if you were a GM player or top 500 player, you would end up getting a second tank on your team who was like diamond, and they would get rolled the entire game. And it just was unfun, and it happened almost every single lobby in Overwatch 1. And it made the game stale. It made the game unfun.
After they abandoned the game, you're right. After they quit the game and there was no incentive for players to play because they were all looking to the sequel. Yes.
It made the game just, in my opinion, way worse.
Yeah, it
so
did.
That's the first thing as to
that's
why
not
I think
6v6.
6v6 is not the answer.
That's not a 6v6 issue. That is a dev abandoning the game issue. If that was the case, why was October of 2020 regarded to be the best patch of all time? They were fresh off a new hero. The game was still getting content. And they hadn't abandoned it yet. It's that simple. That has nothing to do with the format. That has everything to do with the business decision of Overwatch 2.
Queue times for most other roles like DPS and support were completely out of this world in Overwatch 1. Yeah, they're not great in Overwatch 2 as you get higher elo, but they are quite a bit better than Overwatch 1,
they're not.
Especially when you think about not having to fill another 6 slot. A 6 person, you need that extra person to find the lobby to get your game going.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. But what if it makes the game worse? And now you have less people wanting to play it because the game's not as intuitive and the skill ceiling is so much lower and the game is way more one-dimensional. What if you killed off an entire role so half of those tank players don't play tank anymore because it's miserable? You're right back where you started in a worse format where now you've brought those problems to the entirety of the ranks instead of just one. Mauga's win rate was 55% across all ranks. The main thing and the tank synergies that were OP in Overwatch 1 were double shield. Guess what low ranks played? Ryan Zarya. They never played the meta, but now the meta is forced on them, right? It's a worse player experience. What made Overwatch so beautiful was that you as the player were able to execute on whatever character you were playing, right? And it was based on your execution that you got value, right? For 99% of players. But now, because counter swapping is so important, and those matchups, like I've talked about many times, are actually affected at the skill floor instead of the ceiling. Skill doesn't matter. What you do doesn't matter. What you pick does. That's a worse game. Nobody logs on the game to counter swap. They log on to play the heroes that they want to play, right? So to say that that's a 6v6 issue, like it's just silly.
That's another thing. Queue times. The other thing is like just a mismatch in the matchmaking. Yeah, everyone says, oh, it feels like my games are matchmaking is so bad. Blah, 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 blah. But it was way worse in Overwatch 1. Like
no,
I said,
it was
you
not.
Get put into those lower lobbies if you played tank.
No, there are more steamrolls in Overwatch 2 than Overwatch 1. And I think the devs have actually said this. And that is because of 5v5. 5v5 is the determining factor in that. Right? The matchmaker has a really hard job, a really hard time of assessing the difference in tank players. For example, you could have 2 tank players that are the same rank. But if you get Havana and your tank player is a hog player and he's the same rank as the other tank on the other team who is a sig player, you are probably going to lose that game. The matchmaker cannot account for that matchup. And because both tanks are super tanks now, right? Now, the DPS and the supports on the team have less of a chance of making up that gap because the tank on the other team is a super tank, right? And the abilities on the supports on the other team are stronger in this game than they were previously. Right? So, you know, that's why you see more steamrolls in this game. The matchmaker is worse now, and it's because of the format, not the code. It's almost impossible to account for this. And that is why. When you had two tanks on the team, even if they didn't synergize, for 99% of players, both of them were more punishable, and the decisions and the dictation of the match was based on how they played. Now it's way more about what you pick. So in the average ranks, where you get the player who's casually playing and doesn't care and doesn't want to switch, you're way more likely to get steamrolled in that game. That's not a better player experience. It's just not.
Or you'd get a lower lobby ranked tank player in a high rank game, and it would just be a complete and utter egregious game, and it won't be fun. So keep that in mind.
That happens now, but worse.
I'm trying to think, like, what would make this better, right? How would 5v5 feel better? And we have all these issues with Overwatch 2.
Here we go.
And I think it comes down to balancing. From a tank's perspective,
How?
It feels so unfun and stressful to play the tank role. You have so much riding on your shoulders. I mean, you have to create space, you have to do damage, you have to...
Oh, we got a dono. Hold on. Let's see if he can name. Like, everybody always says balancing. Everybody who's trying to defend 5v5 always says balancing. Let's see if he can name a single specific thing that will change the gameplay loop of tank. Getting hit with every cooldown, all that stuff. No amount of balancing to your character changes the fact that you get drilled with everything, right? So let's see if they can name one specific thing that will do it.
Help out your team. You have to swap, right? That's another big thing, is a lot of people in Overwatch, especially in Overwatch 2, they're one tricks. And if you don't play Counterwatch in Overwatch today, it's especially worse than what it was in Overwatch 1 because of the 6v6 setup. You would have a second tank, and that off tank role, you know, would kind of help you out a little bit. But with the 5v5 side, it makes it a little bit more difficult to do that.
Way more difficult.
Another reason also is like the reworks and the balancing of the tank heroes. They removed and changed a lot of the heroes' abilities and the way they're played from Overwatch 1, where they're not really off. There's no real like off tank anymore. And since that doesn't exist, how would that work in 6v6? They would have to rework all the heroes all over again, change things. And let me tell you, the last couple of years of Overwatch were not fun at all. I've had a lot more fun playing Overwatch 2 than Overwatch 1.
Well, yeah, because they abandoned the game. It would be easier to change the heroes to 6v6 heroes than it would be to try to force every character into 5v5, because it destroys 5v5 tank design. Does not allow for unique heroes to exist. They all have to be generalists to get played. It is harder to force these heroes into 5v5 than it is to make them into 6v6. 30-second speed run every tank to 6v6 that got added. Ready? Here we go. Okay. Jungle Queen. Shout only applies to herself. No overheal applied to teammates. Okay? Mauga. Cardiac overdrive only works on himself. Done. Fixed. Obviously, you can adjust health pools. Just be very quickly. Ram. Lower shield health, and you can take way more damage while you're blocking. Keep the same CD cycle, but they're way less powerful, so they can be pierced, so the Ram has to be very smart about taking damage and where he has to play. Done. Who else? Zarya, back to how she was. Sigma, either remove Grasp or remove his shield. That's simple. Orisa, probably can say the same. Let her be crit through Fortify. Done. Done. That took 20 seconds. 20 seconds. It took 20 seconds for me to come up with that, and it would work like a charm. We have years of data of how tanks work in 6v6 and what they do and what they don't do well. But now, we're forced to make all these tanks generalists, and even when you rework them, the gameplay loop still feels like shit. So you're going to do all that work to change nothing and make every tank closer to the same identity, not allowing them to be unique heroes, which is what attracted people to the role and to begin with. So now you're in 5v5 with less unique heroes. You're still stuck in Counterwatch, because no matter what you do, unless every hero is the same, there will be counterpicking that's way more effective in this game. And you've cut half the tank players, so your queue times are just as bad. You're right back where you started, but you have a worse game that's impossible to fix now via balance. Right? Balance doesn't solve Counterwatch. You can't balance counterpicking out of the game. You can't do it. It's always going to exist, right? Why has it been over 2 years now, or coming up on 2 years, and they still haven't fixed the tank gameplay loop? Because you can't fix it with balance. In 6v6, you could fix it with balance. October of 2020 proved that. And Aaron just came out and said there was a weird point in time in high masters and low GM where queue times were actually pretty good for all 3 roles. Yes, because that was the first time Jeff Goodman balanced the game well. Because if you're going to make role queue work, the game always must be balanced and fun for all 3 roles. And if you fuck one up...
Jeff Kaplan. How's it going? I'm Jeff.
Thank you for the gifted, right? If you fuck one up, it not only fucks up the balance of the game, but it also fucks up the queue times of the game.
Jeff Kaplan.
Thank you for the gifted.
How's it going? I'm Jeff.
This has been proven in Overwatch 1 and Overwatch 2. Season 7 of Overwatch 2 proved this. When DPS queue times were
Jeff
instant.
Kaplan. How's it
Because
going?
the
I'm
role
Jeff.
was useless compared to supports because they overtuned supports and broke the balance of the game. Queue times in
Jeff
role
Kaplan.
queue are affected
How's it
more
going?
by
I'm Jeff.
balance than anything else. And they fucked the tank balance of the game. That's why queue times were horrible after they abandoned the game that was paywalled in a free-to-play market for the sequel.
Jeff Kaplan.
Yeah, that's a lot
How's
of
it
different
going? I'm
bullshit.
Jeff.
But you guys get it. I'll let them talk.
So to me, the key thing to make this better, to make 5v5 feel better, is remove the nostalgia
Jeff
out of your
Kaplan.
brain. That nostalgia
How's it going? I'm
factor
Jeff.
is a total and complete bias in our minds. Like, yeah, we had so much fun.
This is what we call classic gaslighting. No offense to this guy. I'm sorry, buddy. I'm not trying to flame you or be a jerk or anything like
Jeff
that.
Kaplan.
Damn, these are a lot
How's
of
it
good
going?
stuff.
I'm Jeff.
Tell me one thing that we've said that's nostalgic, that is all nostalgia, no facts. Name one thing that we have said about 6v6 that is not an objective
Kaplan.
fact.
How's it going? I'm Jeff.
Because respectfully to you, buddy, all you've done is spout nonsense for 5 minutes right now. You've said things, but when you break...
Jeff
Dude,
Kaplan.
how many fucking gifts
How's it
did we
going?
get?
I'm Jeff.
Damn! Nothing we've said has anything to do with nostalgia. It is all objective things that have happened to the gameplay loop. And yet, the 5v5 side have done nothing but gaslight and not bring any objective truth to the matter aside from queue times. And when I bring up queue times, kind of just slipped up a bit and admitted there was a time where queue times were good. Which means it was solvable in 6v6. And he can't take it back. He said this on the Flats interview. There was a time in high rank where queue times were good. And that was because the game was fun and balanced. It is not some rose-tinted dream. It's not the One Piece. We don't know if it's not real. It happened, and Aaron confirmed it. It's not a fairy tale. It is real. But in 5v5, all you guys have said is just balance the game better without giving any real suggestions to do it because they don't exist. They do not exist. You can't balance Counterwatch out of the game. You can't balance the tank power out of the game. You can't because they're solo tanking. And even if you do all of these reworks to these tanks, the gameplay loop and how you actually interact with the other characters in the game doesn't change. It does not change no matter how you rebalance the game because you are the only tank. It's crazy. And no offense to this guy. Seriously, I'm not trying to light this guy up like a Christmas tree. I'm talking about the arguments, not the person here. And I'm trying to get him to understand that, right? I'm trying to get you to understand that. But when you look at the specifics, when we talk about 6v6, I can always give you an objective thing that you can do to fix this problem. But when you talk about 5v5, it's always speculation. For that exact reason, because there's no real substance behind the argument.
On the first few years, the first like 10 seasons of Overwatch 1, get that out of our mind. It was a fresh, new thing. Anything fresh and new.
Nobody has the first 10 seasons of Overwatch on their mind. Ironically, we're talking about October of 2020, which I think was season 24, 25. Late into Overwatch's lifespan is what everybody's talking about. Nobody's talking about the first 10 seasons.
When it's well made, is gonna feel good, and you're gonna long for those days because that was the first time.
Nobody does.
First time that you enjoyed it. Balancing is key. Getting rid of like,
It is.
or making heroes that are like
In 66,
really
when
unskillful
it
to be
mattered.
good at, bad, or not bad, but worse, would be better in my opinion. And no point in state in this game should a bad, like an unskillful hero be meta. And
Okay,
I say, think of players.
What does that have to do with 5v5 or 6v6? It's true in both formats. So I'm not sure what this point is.
Heroes like Moira on the support side, right? How unfun it is when you try to play Genji, which requires a lot of skill.
I agree. You're
and
right.
I'm a support main speaking who plays a lot of Moira.
He is correct,
And you just
Amundo.
swap to Moira and you just take that Genji out of the fight and make it unplayable, and they have to swap to something else. Yeah, you could say get good, get more skills, blah blah blah. You should be able to play
No,
into
you
counters,
can't.
but
You can't.
we're not top 500 players. The vast majority of us, we're not
Even
the best
top
of the
500
best.
players swap
So
off Genji
it will be
against
unfun
Moira.
when you have to go against that, because it's counterwatch basically. So balancing is very important. I'm fine with counters existing, but they should never be so powerful where it just feels like you can't play a hero because the enemy team swapped to my counter.
Okay, so you're for 6v6 then. Because in 5v5, counter watch is way more relevant, and that is caused by the format. You just argued for 6v6. Counter picking is more important because hero strength in 5v5 is way more reliant on the character than the player's ability on the character. That is the big swap that wasn't a thing in 6v6. Because every ability on tanks and supports must be stronger in this game. From base health to ability cooldown time to duration of abilities, right? So you're arguing for 6v6.
I think of like playing Diva against Zarya. Yeah, if you're really good at Diva, maybe you can make the Diva work. But in most cases, the Zarya will just completely flat out shut down the Diva, and it makes it unplayable. Balancing is key. Making tank heroes a bit stronger, making all heroes all around the board.
So if you make Zarya stronger and Diva stronger, what does that actually do? How does that change Counterwatch? What do you want to do? Give Zarya more bubbles or more charge or more damage per charge? Okay, well, that's just going to make her more favored in the Diva. Okay, let's make Diva stronger too. Let's give her more DM. Oh, wait. That doesn't actually change that matchup, because what makes that matchup important is the fundamentals of the beam piercing the DM. So what do? How do you balance that out? You don't. Ability numbers don't actually change the matchup and how it's executed in the game. That is why this new problem of counter swapping is caused by 5v5 role lock. And you cannot fix it with balance, or else they would have fixed it by now. Because this balance team is way more active than the Overwatch 1 one was. Overwatch 1 was solvable via balance. We saw that in October of 2020. The best patches of Overwatch 2, which people have said the game's in a good state, have not solved that problem, because you can't solve that problem via balance.
Especially the high skilled heroes, better and more rewarding to play, and reversing any sort of lower skilled heroes and make that less rewarding to play. I'm not saying to put them in the gutter, still be viable in certain comps and maps, but not be completely and utterly broken, or just not be really, really strong and be a top 5 pick or top 3 pick, whatever, for that specific role. I think if we figure out a way to make the tank role more fun and less stressful and more rewarding, 5v5 would feel better, because I've been cute.
Yeah, if I won the lottery, it'd be great too. If I had wings and I could fly, that would feel awesome. But guess what? I'm a human being. Okay? I don't have wings, right? It's a pipe dream for me to assume that I have wings because I'm a human. You will never get 5v5 to that point in role lock. You never will. Because ultimately, there will always be one tank, no matter what you do. So, yes, you're saying these things, but again, you're giving 0 ways to actually do it. You're just saying these things. And the whole 6v6 argument is that you can say those things, but you can't actually give a way or a path to make it happen, because it's impossible. Because it's a gameplay loop issue. And the tanks have to have more strength on their abilities to work in 5v5 than 6v6. And if that is the case, that means that countering them and counter swapping is going to be more prevalent as well. You're wishing for things that aren't possible and then just saying they should happen because that's how you make it better. But you can't actually give a reason as to why, because the reason doesn't exist. It's not possible. It's impossible to do. It's impossible for me to walk on water. Okay? Yeah, life would be better if I could walk on water. It'd be sick. That's all we got to do. We just got to make it so that I can walk on water. That's what you're saying. It's not possible.
Doing up tank right now. I'm a support and DPS player, and let me tell you, there's a lot on your shoulders. There's a lot of stress.
That sucks.
And there's a lot that you have to do as a tank player.
Absolutely.
And you know, you mess up and die, you lose that fight. You lose that point. And
Yeah, it sucks.
you know, if you're a DPS or a support player, you tend to have a bit more freedom. Especially now in
It's more
season
forgiving.
9, more so for the DPS players.
Hawk said it best. It's like when you're playing tank, there's one right decision and like 10 wrong ones. And it's just a shitty gameplay loop because there's no real tank exchange anymore.
There's a lot more freedom from a DPS perspective, a lot more flexibility. You can
Not
be
really.
countered and
No.
still, you know, do
Not really. There's not more flexibility as DPS because your gameplay loop is also one-dimensional. Because the tank that you were shooting at previously in the previous game that wasn't double shield actually was killable if they misuse a cooldown. Ask any DPS player this. Would you rather 1v1 Mauga in Overwatch 2 or Zarya in Overwatch 1? Would you rather be stuck in a 1v1, which happens all the time, or in a fight, a team fight, against a Overwatch 1 Zarya or an Overwatch 2 Zarya? The answer's simple. It is an Overwatch 1 tank. That option for DPS has gotten significantly reduced, including dueling the supports. Because what got stronger in Overwatch 2? Every single support cooldown. As a DPS player, you don't have more flexibility in this game. They just removed options and said, this is what you have to do. And said that you have more. It's the biggest gaslight in the history of gaming. It's crazy. You don't have more options as a DPS player in this game. You actually have less. So, it's just silly.
do okay. But there's a lot more flexibility. As a tank, you're the one tank versus the other tank. And if they counter you and swap, it's almost like you have to swap and you're playing like musical chairs on what hero am I going to play for this game.
Yeah, and it sucks.
I've played games where I walk out as, I walk out of the gate as D.Va, and the enemy tank ends up getting killed and they come back as Zarya. Then I go back to spawn and I come back as Zarya and I start differing their Zarya. So he comes out as, let's say Winston, who does pretty decently against Zarya. Let's say I swap and I go, I don't know what to deal with the Winston. I swap and I go something else. Like I go Orisa. He comes back out as Zarya. Like things like that just happen all the time from the tank's role, and there's nothing else to fall back on. So balancing would be the best thing to do.
How?
The best way to make things better.
How?
Make
Give me one specific way how to do it. Give me one. Yeah, dude, if I could just walk on water, like all we have to do is make it so that I can walk on water. Life's better. You can't. You can't give a specific reason because it doesn't fucking exist. You can't solve that problem with balance. You solve it by format change, which is why this is a new problem. And what was the variable that we changed? The format. The format is what we changed to make this happen. So if you want to solve it, you have to then change the format again.
higher skilled heroes more rewarding, and less skilled heroes less rewarding. And also, all in all, make the tank role a little bit more fun.
How?
Maybe allow them to do a bit more damage, or give them some rework.
Okay, let's give Zarya more damage. How does that help D.Va not get counterpicked? Let's give both Zarya and D.Va more damage. Okay, Zarya is now even better into D.Va because D.Va's just going to charge her faster and Zarya is still going to pierce her. Same for Orisa. You don't change the gameplay loop by doing that. It doesn't make sense. It's not real, right? So like again, like I'm not trying to flame you, buddy, at all, but I'm trying to get you to understand what you're saying is a fairy tale. It's not real. That wouldn't work. Because what made tank like this and made counter swapping this prevalent was the format change, not the balance change.
That changes up the whole meta. Like there shouldn't be tanks that are completely unplayable. Reinhardt is one tank that
okay, if you don't want tanks to be unplayable, then don't make it so there's only one spot that they all have to compete for. Imagine if we went to one DPS. It'd be the same problem. This is not an answer.
that just has been in the gutter most of Overwatch 2. He was kind of almost like the face of the franchise from the tank role perspective, and he's just so bad. Meanwhile, Tracer, who's the true face of the franchise, she's absolutely bonkers right now and full on S+ tier hard meta and broken at the current moment. So how does that make sense? More fun tanks to play.
How does that make sense? Well, there's 2 DPS on the map, so you can afford to pick Tracer with another type of DPS. And she benefited greatly from the DPS passive. But if there was only 1 DPS you could pick, Tracer would not get picked nearly as much.
Higher skill tanks to play. Make
Nice,
it better,
Spear.
make it more balanced, and
How?
I think that will fix the problem.
How? You haven't given a specific other than deal more damage, which doesn't change anything. Well, I wonder if Tracer's always broken because there's no off tank to check her either. Yes. You haven't given a specific way to actually solve it. You've just been talking, and I just want you to understand that. You can't think of a specific thing because it doesn't exist. Because what caused this was a format change. That's like saying, it's like if you broke your leg and then you were trying to change your arm, be like, you know what? Like, maybe we should just walk on our arms. Like, use one arm and one leg and then we can run as fast. No. At the end of the day, if you break your leg, you need to fix your leg. It's crazy.
If you end up having, more fun playing the game from a tank's perspective, 5v5 works. We can't go change the 6v6. It just, queue times would be crazy. Matchmaking would be even worse. It would just...
How would matchmaking be worse when it's been confirmed there are more Steam rolls in this game now? Queue times were fine in October of 2020 when the game was good. And the game was paywalled back then. You add a ton of variety to the tank roll, make the tank roll a higher quality role to play. So are we really going to argue? It's pretty much unanimously accepted that tanking was more fun in Overwatch 1 than Overwatch 2. How in the hell are we at the point where the best argument is if we make our product better, less people would want to play it? That is where the 5v5 camp is at. That is your argument. You just made this entire video saying that tanking sucks in this game, and then said it would be worse when tanking was fine in Overwatch 1 when they balanced the game well in the way they do now. Queue times were not bad because of the format. Queue times were bad because they abandoned the game and made one of the worst balance patches of all time. Worse than GOATs. And left it in the game. And you can't refute that because Aaron has confirmed that at high levels, queue times were good at a certain point in time. And we all know when that was. Fall of 2020. And I remember queuing in those games. My queues were never longer than 2 to 3 minutes at top 100 on each roll.
Be way too hard to try and figure out how to balance. You would have to rework.
Ironically, how is it hard to figure out how to balance? We know how to balance 6v6. You just sat here and said what Blizzard needs to do for 10 minutes is to balance the game better, but you couldn't give a single point. You couldn't bring up a single point as to how to actually balance the game better. And then you claim that it's harder to balance 6v6, but you couldn't give a single point to fix it here? Abilities don't have to be as strong in 6v6. There are more organic ways for heroes to be played, and the agency is more in the player's hands rather than what you picked, which is why counter-swapping was not nearly as big of an issue in 6v6. So how can you say all of those things and then say balancing is harder in 6v6 than 5v5? Completely wrong. You could not be more wrong, and you have no points to back it. This is gaslighting, and frankly, ignorance. This is an ignorant take. No offense, I'm not trying to flame you. I'm just trying to get you to understand that what you're saying and what you're claiming are completely different things. That's all.
Tons of heroes and to make it work. And it just was a long-standing problem from the Overwatch 1 perspective.
Yeah, because the dev team was terrible. That is a personnel issue. If a football coach can't score, it'd be like if like an offense, like an Iowa's offense in football couldn't score. And then they said, you know what, let's just take away a receiver. And then they hire a new offensive coordinator and all of a sudden they're scoring. But like the offense still isn't as powerful because there's one less receiver on the field. They're two completely different things. What ruined Overwatch 1 was the dev team and Overwatch 2's existence, not 6v6.
You know, a lot of you watch my videos and my shorts, but I'm going to ask if you can, please like this video. Also, sub to my YouTube channel, share this with.
Hey, buddy, listen. All right. I hope the YouTube grind goes well, bro. Even if we disagree, you know, I hope to. I never am going to root against content creators, so I hope streaming goes well for you. I hope that maybe my response to this could change your mind and make you think outside the box a little bit about the 5v5, 6v6 argument. You know, honestly, I don't think you really had any points, but, you know, you're a good dude, and I hope content creation goes well for you. Best of luck, man.